Hello and welcome to the Gidlow Movie Show, the return of a show that you may have never heard before, but you are now listening to. It is a show brought to you by the brothers Gidlow. I am Daniel Gidlow, and I am joined with my brother,
Thomas Gidlow.
Hey! That's the Gidlows behind the show.
Contrary to popular belief, it is not just Daniel doubling his voice.
Oh, yeah, that was a comment we got a lot back in the day when we started this.
Yeah.
Just, I sound like I'm talking to myself, which I think maybe over the years we've gotten more farther apart in voice. We haven't been around each other a whole lot, so might be different.
That's true. We are actually two people. Who'd have thunk it?
Who'd have thunk it? Well, anyway, we're going to get right to it. This week, we are going to be tackling the topic that is very, 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 very close to my heart and Thomas's heart as well, I'm sure. Maybe my heart a little bit more than his.
Definitely.
The Lego Batman movie is coming out this weekend, and we're going to be talking some Batman. We're going to be going the entire history. We're going to talk about whatever. This show is going to be very scatterbrained. Tom and I are very tangential, and we'll go off and talk about a bunch of stuff, but we often get in Skype calls, and almost every single time I feel like we should be recording it because we have, I think, interesting conversations about movies or actors or whatever.
This Skype call has been going for 3 hours already. We should have hit record about 2 hours ago.
Hey, it's only been going for an hour, and we should have started recording about 15 minutes ago.
Alternate facts.
All right. Batman. We're talking Batman. Thomas, what was your? Because I don't know if I'm fully aware of your Batman history.
Oh my!
Where did it start with you?
Actually, it's funny you bring that up. It was a vague reference when I was like 6 years old or maybe 7 years old. Mm-hmm. For those of you that don't know, I'm a little older than Daniel.
You are 6 years older than me, so yes. I was either not born or just born.
I am 58 years old. Anyway, so. It was a random reference to Michael Keaton, and I remember Jack Nicholson when the first thing that I was ever introduced to when it came to Batman was Jack Nicholson, and I didn't read like comics, and I don't know if there was cartoons around at that time that had Batman, but I just remember Jack Nicholson. That was my real introduction to Batman.
If you were 5 or 6, then that would have been 1989. That would have been when the first movie came out.
Yes, it was Batman, and then I don't remember anything from Batman Returns. I don't remember ever seeing either movie when I was a kid, but I do remember Batman Forever. That was really, in terms of like the movies, my first interaction or my first introduction to it. But obviously, I think for both of us, we were introduced to the '60s TV series. Very early on.
Yeah. Well, that was a story that was always told back to me about me sitting in front of the TV going, na 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 Batman. And so that was kind of where I guess it started for me, because when we were kids, that's when they started syndication for a lot of older TV shows, kind of in the early 90s, late 80s, where they were re-syndicating shows. And that came back into syndication. And I remember Nana and Dave would tape a lot of the episodes. They had a lot of episodes taped and watching stuff there and watching a lot of that show. But also because of the original movie, they also introduced, I think in 92 it was, the animated series, Batman the Animated Series, right around when Batman Returns came out.
That was another one. I think we watched the animated series and the original television show probably more than maybe anything at that time. Maybe Animaniacs would have been like the only other show.
Well, and the Simpsons and stuff like that. We watched The Simpsons.
And The Simpsons. We watched that all the time.
The Simpsons, Law and Order, and Star Trek were the if there's any reference you need to understand us as human beings, that's all what we grew up on. Anyway, that's nothing to do with Batman. But yes, a lot of that early stuff, early in the... I would say even movie-wise, I didn't really click in until Forever as a kid. That was the first one I really saw. I don't know if I saw the original Batman before I saw Batman Forever. So I was already kind of locked into that kitschy Batman outside of the animated series, which was, a lot darker and more straightforward Batman.
The animated series is probably more true to the source, I think.
I think the animated. Yes, than the rest it certainly is. But it also creates I think the animated series is really in my opinion the definitive take on Batman, just because I think it gets so many aspects right. Like it gets everything right. He's a detective. He's a warrior. He's a thinker. He's all that jazz. They get the character perfect. They have so many great stories. But
he didn't dance in that, did he? He didn't do the Watusi.
He had to have danced at some point. There had to be been some
maybe
dancing.
in the later version. What was it? The Robin, when Robin did his thing. What was that show called? It was like the not a sequel, but it was like an extension of the animated series. It was somebody's screaming it right now as they're listening to this.
Sure.
But he was red, and he had a red stripe on his suit. It was Robin.
I'm blanking.
Oh, come on.
Teen Titans?
You ought to know this.
Like,
no, this was after the animated series. It took
the-
place after the animated series, and it was like Bruce Wayne was older.
Oh, you're talking. No, that's not Robin. You're talking about Batman Beyond.
Beyond. That's what it was.
Terry McGinnis
Yes.
or whatever. Or Terry Guinness, I think was
Whatever
his name.
it was. Yeah, I remember
Terry.
that too. Cause
It was the red
around
bat
the same-
symbol, and he had the black suit with the slick ears and the little
right.
wings. And no, Batman Beyond was also a very good show. It was a really
Yes.
great follow up, and also again did its own thing and completely changed up the story, set it apart, and went at it. And it was also really good, kind of spin off of the old animated series Batman show, because it carried over a lot of the great elements.
Oh, it was an extension of that, and it was again Kevin Conway playing Batman and
Conroy.
Whatever. Kevin Conway, Conroy.
Conway Twitty playing Batman. Yeah. And well, that show had a great amount of talent when it came to villains. They had Roddy McDowell as who was Roddy McDowell? Jeez, why am I blanking on that? Roddy McDowell was on there. Ron Perlman played Clayface. You had
Well, don't forget Mark Hamill. Mark
Hamill, the Joker,
and Patrick Stewart, of course, played Mr. Freeze on the animated series.
in model only.
Yes, if you actually look at that, somebody go to Google Images and
It looks like
Mr.
him.
Freeze from the animated series. It looks a lot like Jean-Luc Picard.
He very much, if they had gone with that adaptation of look, he very well could have played Mr. Freeze, and that would have been very interesting. I mean, not in the Arnold movie sense, but like if they had gone with that character a little. I mean, no, Batman Forever does follow that story for Mr. Freeze, which by the way was original to the animated series. That's the origin they came up for the animated series. Also, Harley Quinn was an original character created for the animated series. Like the animated series did a lot to progress Batman in just the pop culture.
And it's a backwards compliment to the people that made Forever and Batman and Robin that they knew the source material enough at least to get some of the characters that were at least topical and
well, I mean that was the most defining trait for Mr. Freeze. So they were like, okay, his wife has a disease and she's frozen. Let's go with that, and they did that, and it was
a really
well done.
great story, and it's too bad. And this goes kind of to somewhat. We'll get into this hardcore because I have some very probably different opinions than you do on this when we get down into the 2000s, when of course for me Batman really became something that is near and dear to my heart.
Oh yeah.
But the Mr. Freeze character was such a great, the idea of the character was so great. But of course, especially that time in the 90s when everything was popcorn, everything was bigger, badder action, blah, blah, blah. They turned him into a joke. And unfortunately, that's what happens. But the story of that character really could have been something, super interesting.
Yeah, and something that really frustrated me was we had. Well, that's not true. In Batman the Animated Series, they did. They kind of did that. Freeze has his wife thing where she has the disease, she's frozen, and he's trying to cure her, blah blah blah. That only worked for so long, and eventually there were points where it's just like, what are his motives? Like it seemed like at points he was just straight up villain, and they didn't really give him much motive. But
he was Walter White before Walter White.
Pretty much. And
he
then,
had a motive, and then he got into the business, and then he started doing it for himself.
Yeah. And that's that's the story we saw in the animated series. No, really, like, and then the movie did the same thing, brought up the same origin, same thing. Still no end to that story, and no finality or arc to him saving his wife. There was never any wrap up to that.
He became a good guy, didn't he?
He did, but his wife has still not been saved in any of the iterations I've ever seen. But
that's the downfall of Joel Schumacher.
Yeah, okay, but yeah, that didn't have a resolution. But in Batman Arkham Knight, in the DLC, or no, not Arkham Knight. It was Batman Arkham Knight. They had a DLC called I think it was Cold Heart DLC. That might have been for Arkham Origins, actually. Never mind. There was DLC for Arkham Knight that once again found Freeze, because in Batman Arkham City, they once again had that same thing. His wife's frozen. That's his origin. Blah blah blah. But didn't really further it a whole lot. They brought finally an end to it. Well, I don't want to really spoil it for anybody, but I liked finally seeing some sort of resolution to that storyline because I never have, and it's fascinating seeing Nora. It is that kind of same thing where Freeze is still, he can still come back, but she never wanted to see him do anything, even to save. Like all the horrible things he did was never something that she never wanted. Obviously, she wouldn't.
Sorry, not to cut you off, but isn't that kind of a false high in a sense, though? Because I mean, you get to see that part of the story play out, but in a way different realm than in a comic or in a movie or in a TV show.
It plays out in a cutscene. It's still story.
Well, I know that, but it's not canon, is it?
It's canon to that story.
To the story of the video game, but like in the sense of seeing something on that scale being done on a film or in a show or something like that, it would have a bit of a different impact.
I don't know. Story-wise, it was still nice to have a resolution to that storyline, whether it's in a movie or not. And the games vary. Like the games are scope-wise. I mean, it's no less impactful than a movie or a television show or anything. It's just a different medium. But story-wise, I was just happy finally to see that thread just tied up, because that's one that always bothered me.
Well, I suppose you can take that and put it with everything that you've seen to date, and then it's like, oh.
Exactly, and that's what... Yeah. And the Arkham games kind of hop off of somewhat the animated series, not canon, but, just story and characters, and a lot of that stuff is derived from there, including most of the voice actors, including Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill. And
how weird is that he's really stood the test of time? Like, all the different people that have played Batman... And he's been the one that's been playing all the animated versions for the most part.
For the most part, yeah. And they've definitely switched up the voice a bunch, including even in the video games and the television shows. I mean, it's not always been Kevin Conroy, but he has been by far the most consistent and still seemingly
Mark
not
Hamill
done with it. Huh?
Yeah, Mark Hamill is a close second.
Yeah, exactly. Like both of those guys have been long since doing it, and I mean, seem to kind of just keep doing it. They did The Killing Joke together, which I still haven't seen. But apparently that one's pretty lackluster, despite them both being involved, playing the Joker and Batman, and arguably one of the most definitive Batman stories in the comic books, which I know you haven't read. But or have you read The Killing Joke?
No.
Okay, I thought you were about to say I have.
Thought you were making. I thought you were making a dig, but
no.
Plays.
I'm just acknowledging that you don't know.
That is true, and I don't care to know. But that plays perfectly.
I don't like good stories.
No, that's not true. I just like them presented in a different form. Now, I will say...
You prefer movies over comic books.
love to read. I love reading books, and just as a sort of tangent and a comeback, my favorite book series is the Shatnerverse of Star Trek books.
Oh, yeah.
And I know a lot of people are like, oh, that's how you... But whatever. I get it. I 100% get it. But those are some of my favorite books of Star Trek that I've read. It has nothing to do... It makes no sense in the canon of Star Trek. But like you, for the video games or for the comics, it's a way interesting take on a lot of the things that you see in the main... Not the main, but in the movies and in the TV shows and that sort of thing.
It's a separate interpretation, but still an adaptation.
Correct. And that's how I get my fill. Like in books... on that sense, whereas you are more comic and video game oriented, to each their own.
I like books as well.
No, I know that. I'm not saying that you have to because you like comics and video games. You don't like books. No, I prefer a good book. I don't play a lot of video games. I couldn't tell you what. I mean, the last video game that I played regularly was probably like NHL 2000. So cool. That ought to that on the original PlayStation. That ought to tell you, my extent of my background in video games.
We had a Dreamcast. That was after the PlayStation.
Yeah, but I didn't play that as anywhere near like I played like the Super Nintendo and the
true.
PlayStation. Yeah, but. Anyhow.
Yeah, you played at least enough for me to dick around with the memory card a bunch, because the memory card was like a little controller, so I'd pull the memory card out of the Dreamcast controller and...
Remember those?
Yeah, really. Memory cards?
8 megabytes was huge back in the day.
Oh man, I remember paying $20-something for like a for like a 5 megabyte flash drive, and it was like this big bulky red thing.
And now you can get a terabyte for like $15.
I know, it's insane.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Technology.
we're old people, but not really.
We're not old people. But anyway, bringing it back to the discussion at hand, I want to get to all the way down to present day eventually, because I really want to talk about the Lego Batman movie. And I think that's, just as a short comment on that, I think that is movies done right. 100%. Yeah. But anyway, so we were talking about Batman Forever and leading into Batman and Robin. And it's funny because when we watched it as kids, I think, at least for me, it was one of the movies that I'd always go back to and watch and be like entertained, seriously entertained.
Oh, yeah.
I go back and watch it now and I think it's horrible. Like,
yeah.
I'll rip it apart and I won't enjoy it at all, especially Batman and Robin. But I remember being so amped to see Batman and Robin as a kid. What
was that, 97?
Like,
98?
98, somewhere in that range. I know Batman Forever was 95. And you guys can Google it and correct me. But I'm pretty sure Batman Forever was 95. And I think Batman and Robin was either 97, 98.
Yeah, one of the two.
Probably came out pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Because Batman Forever was a pretty good success, I think.
Well, I mean, there was like a 2-year gap, but also they lost Kilmer. I wondered what the whole thing about that was. Why they dropped Kilmer, or what?
I don't think it was a situation where and I could be wrong, but I wouldn't have thought it was a situation they dropped Kilmer. It was one of those things that George Clooney was the hottest guy.
Oh, certainly. ER was huge at the time.
And if you'd have said to anyone, what, like, especially in Hollywood or something like that, hey, what's the number one guy we could get to play Batman right now? George Clooney. So
who has a dimple on his chin?
I don't think it was a knock on Val Kilmer as much as it was, you know what, we had a huge success with Forever. Let's go for the jugular and bring in the hottest actor right now.
Yeah.
And that was George Clooney. So,
and man, between the two, when I think Val Kilmer and George Clooney, and who I think would be the more charismatic Bruce Wayne, I'm surprised it's not George Clooney, because I think Val Kilmer was probably a bit more charismatic than George Clooney was in his delivery. George Clooney looked like he just showed up and read lines.
Oh, he totally mailed it in. It was completely there to pick up the paycheck, and it was a fat paycheck, I'm sure. But, I mean, you can't even compare the two. Val Kilmer, for me anyway, I'm partial a little to the fact that he was so good in Heat. He was so good in Wyatt Earp. And those are two of my favorite movies. And
certainly.
He played Batman very well. And I don't think he gets the credit that he really deserves for that. And it's, somewhat unfortunate how his career has kind of taken a little bit of a different turn. But, I mean...
Well, and he has, I think, he has throat cancer or some sort of oral cancer currently.
There's a lot of rumors going on around it. I haven't really paid much
attention. Well, Michael Douglas has
true.
talked about it, apparently, has spoken on behalf of him and said, I'm not sure if I'm supposed to, but because Michael Douglas had also gone through oral cancer, and that's why he had brought it up. But, whether or not it's true or not, hopefully not. But, I mean, even then, hopefully he pulls through and everything goes all right.
I thought he came out and was like, yeah, I mean, I have some issues, but I'm nowhere near the state that people made it out to.
I haven't really followed it, so maybe it is less dire than I thought it was. But he certainly did the best with what he had. I mean, that movie has some really gigantic leaps in logic, especially when it comes to the riddle stuff. I would as a kid, I never understood any of that stuff when they were going through the riddles, and they were just like instantly solving it, and like, no, it's kind of like the animated, or not the animated series. It is like the Adam West things where it's...
And I know people in the comments will back me up. That was the whole point. It wasn't that they were trying to stump them with the riddles. It was like, I don't care about that. That's like, we're throwing that away for you. We're giving you all that. We want you... The whole idea was for him to build his dream machine of being able to tap into people's brains. He didn't care about the riddles as much. It was a completely different take on the Riddler than...
No, I know. It
should have been.
But no, Batman and Alfred solving them is a little ridiculous, because they just like rapid fire read it and they're like, oh yes, this, oh yes, oh then this, and it's completely ridiculous how fast they come up with it. That's what I'm talking about. But even then, that's kind of the joke. But Forever is certainly it takes itself a little bit more seriously than Batman and Robin does. Clearly, Batman and Robin flips that switch. and becomes a completely different movie, which I don't think Joel Schumacher realized exactly when he had made it. I think he realized he made a bit more of a fun movie and a lighter movie than Burton's Batman, and then it was kind of like, I feel because Batman, I feel like, was Burton doing Batman, adapting Batman, blah blah blah. Batman Returns is Burton going full Burton on Batman and doing his thing and making it his movie. And I feel like Batman Forever is Schumacher coming in, doing his adaptation of Batman, but then Batman and Robin is what he wanted to do, full on Joel Schumacher, everything he wanted to do. Same thing.
But you know what's super telling though is that Batman Returns was the last movie that Tim Burton had anything to do with Batman.
Well, no, he was a producer. He was a producer on Schumacher's films.
I'm a producer on 17 films. That's how much it means to be a producer.
Batman Forever though was written. The script was written. And Burton was set to direct. Keaton was set to come back. And then Schumacher came in as director. Burton stepped back as producer. And Keaton was like, I didn't sign on to make a movie with Joel Schumacher. I want to keep doing Burton. So he dropped out. And then that was the first time. It was kind of like the Bond thing where it was like, well, we have this universe and we want this continuity to stay. Batman Forever, I never understood as a kid, takes place in the same continuity, which didn't make sense to me as a child, but it does. It continues. It's supposed to be that Keaton Batman continuing on. It's not supposed to be a separate continuity, which for me confuses me it still now confuses me because it doesn't make sense just tonally, that universe. But
I see it as two different series. It's like,
yes,
it's like
and
Nolan's
I do.
movies.
But the fact that it was supposed to be a direct, continuation. They even make a reference. They make a reference to Catwoman and stuff like that in the movie, which could be taken.
I never picked up on any of that.
Neither had I, but apparently that was
never.
just stuff left in the script to reference other movies. I mean, the last movie ends with Catwoman looking at the bat signal.
Suffice it, right. Oh, right. That's true. But suffice it to say, those were they got to play in the sandbox with all the tools and warp the core idea of the movie in their own image. Those were the last two movies that they got to do with those. Burton with Batman Returns and Schumacher with Batman and Robin. Why would that be? Because they were terrible, in a lot of senses. Not that Batman Returns.
You and I went back and watched Batman Returns a few years back, and I think
it's very hard to follow that movie. It's very hard to stay engaged with that movie.
Really?
In my opinion.
Returns?
And I think it has a lot to do, and I know it gets sort of not stylized, but it gets kind of honored just through history. But Danny DeVito's take on the Penguin was not very good. I didn't think.
It's certainly off-putting, and that's as a kid, I never liked it because it was off-putting. It was but as an adult coming back to it, I get it a bit more, and I see the parallels that they were trying to do, and because they were trying to do the whole two sides of the same coin sort of deal. Cobblepot comes, that's the kind of story a lot of the time they do with the Penguin when it comes to origin stuff. Is Cobblepot's family was just as affluent and it was up there with the Waynes, and then in that story in Batman Returns, they end up sending him down the river, and he goes to the sewer and ends up so with the loss of his parents, he goes to the sewer, becomes Penguin as opposed to Batman. Batman lost his parents, blah blah blah. Different, that two sides of the same coin kind of story. And I never got that as a kid, and now going back and watching, I was like, oh, there's effort put into the story more than I thought there was.
That would be such an awesome story if he wasn't a penguin. Like, I could care less about the penguin aspect.
That part where he bites that guy's nose always scared me as a kid.
It's just throw that away. And imagine if you take the penguin stuff away, how awesome is that origin story? You have Bruce Wayne and his it could be a rival.
Oh, well,
they're both
the Telltale Batman game fully explores that.
Yeah, that would be an awesome, a take on the Penguin.
Yeah,
just call him something else or whatever. I never got into the Penguin.
They call him Penguin in that, but it still works.
I love the Joker, although I didn't like the Joker until Heath Ledger. But I was a big Riddler. That I liked the Riddler. I liked a little bit of a cerebrum to the bad guys.
You've already qualified your Batman fandom. So you were kind of more so the movies and the TV shows somewhat. So you were more of a Riddler guy because of Jim Carrey, probably.
Oh, and I appreciated Jim Carrey's take, but I knew full well, even as a kid, I'm watching Jim Carrey
be Jim Carrey.
Play Jim Carrey. Yeah. I'm not watching the Riddler. I'm watching Jim Carrey play Jim Carrey.
Yeah.
I even knew that as a kid because Liar Liar was a movie that I watched over and over
Ace
again.
Ventura. We used to have movie nights where we would all pick VHSs, put them in a bag or whatever, and every single time I would put Ace Ventura into that bag.
Ace Ventura, yes.
Which, as a kid, that's not a kid movie. That's not a child's movie.
But we would watch the ripped version. We didn't watch like the version you go to the store and buy. We'd tape it from ABC or something like that, and we'd have all the swears cut out.
Stop breaking the law, brasshole!
Oh my God, when they used to dub them, they were so bad.
Liar, liar. They still do that. It still happens.
Yeah, but nowhere near as bad as. It's not like they completely changed.
I like that they actually get the actors to come in and loop the lines in and stuff. Like Samuel L. Jackson in Snakes on a Plane is pretty amazing.
Mother flipping.
It's the monkey fighting
Monday to Friday.
Monkey fighting snakes on this Monday to Friday plane.
Monday to Friday.
Monkey fighting snakes.
How does Monday to Friday plane make any sense at all?
Melon farm and plane.
Yeah.
Even then.
Monkey flipping's even better, I guess.
Yeah. No, it's monkey fighting. Monkey fighting.
Monkey fighting.
Snakes. Because snakes fight monkeys in countries. I don't know.
Well, Snakes on a Plane made it into this podcast, and I will effort every single episode to make sure that somehow we get a reference to Snakes
Fantastic.
on a Plane.
Snakes on a Plane and Stuart Baird. Let's do it.
Stuart Baird is the best editor-director of...
Joe and I went through all the Star Trek movies recently because he was going through Next Gen, so we finally went through the Next Gen Star Trek movies. This is completely nothing to do with Batman, but it was fantastic, and I liked it.
We were just talking a second ago about Heath Ledger, or I brought it up. We weren't talking about it.
Yeah.
So that segues perfectly into the meat and potatoes of what I want to get to, is that I appreciate the animated series, and I appreciate the original Batman from Adam West's day, and obviously I appreciate the movies. But it really wasn't until, and I tell you the truth, it wasn't until The Dark Knight. I watched Batman Begins, and it was a very good movie. It's very well done, and I loved it and everything like that.
Completely different take on Batman.
It was a completely different take, and I could, and believe me, when I watched that movie, I couldn't care less of what came before it.
Yeah.
And I had no idea, like, I didn't go into it with any expectation at all. And I watched that film, and I'm like, this is what Batman should be. And then, forget the Batman.
And then story. Another movie came along that made you completely disregard all the movies before it.
When The Dark Knight comes out, I just don't know, like, I understand it's held very highly by a lot of people, but I don't think people realize just how fundamentally brilliant that movie is. Like, I think Christopher Nolan brought something to Batman that still is yet not fully appreciated. And I think it's a shame, honestly, and it's probably more on him that he didn't want to continue it, or and more power to him, because who wants to get bogged down into the same thing over and over again. But I think it's a shame that didn't get explored upon, and that it was almost immediately sort of not immediately, but it was almost pretty much ended by the Batman vs. Superman movie, because Man of Steel continued that tradition. And Man of Steel was so... There were parts I was a little whatever, but it was so in line with that, and I thought this is the future of movies. This is where we're going now. We're going into this very gritty and very real direction, and then now we're back into just complete and utter nonsense. And that's what, like, because that's what, to me, base it in some sort of reality, so that I can see, hey, in my real life, this could feasibly happen, Yeah. Even with Bane. Okay. Bane.
Well, I mean, what outside of the dark side, or not dark side, Doomsday stuff at the end of Batman v Superman couldn't have happened?
Well, I mean, there's a part of the middle of the movie where I have no idea what happened. I still don't know what happened.
Well, have you seen it since?
I have only seen it once,
and that was at the theater with me. I remember I went back home, and we all went and saw it. And
yes,
you need to see the Ultimate Edition as well. Not to say that that's like any excuse for the movie, because the movie is the movie.
Right.
But the Ultimate Edition
I thought it was
clears up a little bit. But I mean, it also adds a little bit more to the movie.
that's fine. And I thought it was a good movie.
Yeah.
I didn't think it was a bad movie in any stretch.
It's just a different flavor than what you've come to expect or want from a Batman movie.
And it's arcing back up towards, now we're going to start getting into this ridiculous sort of mold where
kind of the Marvel realm.
Things are just, it's like Avengers going with, out from Captain America, where it's somewhat based in some kind of reality, into this fantastical world that now you lost me. When you're talking about alternate dimensions and whatever the heck's going on with, purple guy and red guy, I don't know. Like, to me as a casual person, I don't know any of these things. I'm not familiar with, comics.
And neither am I. I'm just, attuned to Google and people explaining it. Because I'm a big Batman fan and a big comic book fan, but not so much from the movie, or not so much from the comic books. Kind of like you, I was always more so movies, and then as I aged, I kind of got into the comics a little bit, and I still always have that desire to get into the comics more. But I'm more of I'm waiting for the movie kind of guy, like you are.
Yeah.
But I'm more so in the. I'm still interested in the direction they're going. I'm interested in the expansion of that, and I've always wanted to see a more cartoony, comic-y Batman, because the animated series, like, that's more of a comic booky take on it, but it's also still played very straight, and it doesn't seem like outrageously implausible outside of the realm of science fiction. Like, in science fiction, certainly I think it's a little wobbly, but Star Trek's wobbly with science fiction and stuff like that. It's not really any different.
100% true. And actually, not to go off on a tangent, because we can talk about Star Trek for a million years.
Yes. Man, when Discovery comes out, I know what we're talking about.
Hopefully it's good. That's all I meant.
You and I should get in a Skype call and just binge it all, because it'll be all on CBS All Access if they do the whole Netflix release schedule.
I'm getting CBS All Access just for that.
Yeah.
Why the hell else would I?
Yeah, I'm going to get it and then immediately cancel it and then get it the next season.
I'm going to go one further. I'm going to rip all the episodes and then I'm going to cancel it.
The thing that sucks about that deal is CBS made a deal with, domestically, it's on CBS All Access. Everywhere else, it's on Netflix.
Correct.
Which,
yes.
Yeah!
Well, I mean, damn. Where else are you going to buy CBS All Access? Nowhere.
Yeah, no other country. That's true. That's true.
Right. So, and I think I don't have a problem with them wanting to put a show as big as Star Trek on the
certainly.
internet.
Me paying $7 is certainly worth watching the show.
Oh, I don't care. Like people that actually, and this is like a completely sidetracked vent, but people that complain about, I'm not paying. You're paying $5 damn. Who cares?
Not anymore. It's closer to 10 or 11 now.
Have they jacked the price up
with
now?
Netflix? They went to 11 or $11.99, I think. They went
but CBS All Access is like $5 a month.
It's like $8 a month or $7.99, I think.
Well, get Sling. It's not $8 a month on Sling.
Oh, okay.
But at any rate, but whatever it is, even if it's $10 a month,
it's certainly
worth
it. If you're a
Star Trek fan, if you're a Star Trek fan and you're getting a brand new show, I mean, granted, it would even for me who never watches TV much at all, never much at all. How about that? But nobody, so that hardly ever watches TV. I would rather see it on CBS because CBS is like the number one network. So that would be awesome for an audience.
And All Access allows them to do more adult things and also kind of like be less touchy about what goes on television. They can be less censored.
And they've talked about that. They've made direct references to that fact that they're going to be wide open. They're going to have a lot more freedom to do what they want to do, regardless of whether or not it has to, adhere to certain standards.
Yeah.
So that's great. But back to the point that I was trying to make with Star Trek is that Star Trek is to the point now where it needs a Christopher Nolan to snap it back, because it has gotten to the point where it's too stylized. And I'm afraid that when the fourth Star Trek movie
I feel like
out,
Beyond rolled back the style a little bit. It certainly had a style, but it didn't, it wasn't J.J. Abrams in your face mystery box style.
Right, but and I'm not saying that this is any time soon or anything like that, because obviously Star Wars is huge and everything, and there's going to be 10 million Star Wars movies coming out in the next 5 years. But I think this is where you're going to have to go to sustain movies long term, and I'm talking about really long term, is that you have to start basing them in some kind of reality that we can identify with. When you are talking about when we are witnessing the birth of, SpaceX and being able to go to Mars, and we're seeing how these ships are built and how they're being propelled, and warp is a real thing. Warp theory is a real thing, but it has nothing to do with the way that what we see in Star Trek. It's a completely different take. And back in the day, it made perfect sense. But I think we're getting closer to the time where we kind of have to take a step back and say, look, our actual technology is starting to make leaps to the point where we have to kind of, make this a little bit more based on reality, because you're going to lose touch with people. I think.
Yes.
That's just my opinion.
What specifically do you like? What do you feel is detached from reality with Batman v Superman or something like just in general?
I think it's just the overall feel of the film. Whereas you had with The Dark Knight, The Dark Knight Rises.
I feel like Batman v Superman almost felt like a courtroom drama at one point, like between the Senate stuff and like I feel like there's a lot of really grounded reality stuff in there.
I just feel like after you watch Batman vs Superman, you get the sense, especially knowing what's coming down the pike, you get the sense that it's going to start being more of the flighty kind of just, interjecting random humor, the one-liner kind of thing, where before it was very...
Are you saying Batman v Superman had that, or you're feeling like after the fact that they're going to start doing that?
No, I'm saying it after the fact.
Yeah, because people criticize Batman v Superman for not having a sense of humor. And
I'm not. But even the Nolan movies had a big sense of humor. If you missed it,
somewhat. I mean, they had those jokes. They had the my favorite one was from Batman Begins, where they're like the tumbler chase was happening, and the guy was like, "Well, at least tell me what it looks like," and then it drives by, and he's like, "Never mind." And then it goes.
But it was so rare.
Yeah, that's true.
That when you saw it, it was impactful, and that's what. See, but that's just me. That's personal.
Well, that was a big criticism. People levied against Batman v Superman that there wasn't levity every once in a while to kind of like. I think there was only one joke. Well, there was one or two jokes in that movie that always got a laugh every single time. Even you laughed. You had a good cackle laugh. Well, no, you had a good cackle laugh at a different point. But the Jolly Rancher. The jar of piss, which you cackle laughed at. You were cackling.
The jar of piss was
you were laughing at the jar of piss. You were the loudest person laughing, which was hilarious to me when we watched it. Then the line at the end when he's like, "I'm a friend of your son's," and she was like, "I could tell by the cape or whatever." And that gets a line or a laugh typically, but that was pretty much it. And then other than that, people were like, "eh." But then with Justice League, they seem to be course correcting and adding more humor into it and making it a little bit more light. And it seems the way they're going with the whole Batman killing people thing and all that stuff and being so extreme, they're going to be kind of reeling that back because he's learned his lesson after Superman sacrificed himself, blah 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 blah, and he's kind of like. He was in a very dark place in Batman v Superman, and now he's going to kind of be coming out of that. That's the idea.
Yeah, it was a different type of dark place, though. Whereas with Nolan's Batman, he was always in a dark place. Like, you didn't get the sense
it was typically he was defeated often, it seemed.
Right.
Like, every single movie he was defeated midway through and then came back at the end. And these ones, he feels like, well, at least in Batman v Superman, he felt powerless and... It felt the only thing he could do was to kill Superman. That would be his, the only thing he could do.
Plus, there was a very realness. There was a realness to what happens to Batman, particularly in The Dark Knight Rises. I still, my heart goes aflutter every time I think of it. When they're doing the fight scene when Batman's introduced to Bane. And that is the fight scene.
That scene, yeah, it gets your heart pumping every single time. It's shot so well, it's lit really well, it's presented in like just an amazing way. The dialogue it has this weird poetic nature to it that I don't think many fight scenes or scenes like that have, where it's just like it feels like, oh my, like you just get that chill every single time that scene starts.
It's a complete reality check. Even if you're just, no matter what your view is on the movie to that point, it's a complete reality check that this is a completely different universe that Batman doesn't belong in anymore. And that vulnerability and reality to me makes that movie and those three movies for me is that's the take that he gives with it. Whereas when you see a fight scene with Batman and Superman,
Oh, yeah.
where it's completely unrealistic, and I understand Superman's superhuman
Okay,
and all this
so
other stuff.
that final fight scene,
But-
everybody does jizz over it. I do kind of check out at that moment. A lot of people, it's a lot of people's favorite moment of the movie, and they're like, finally, they're fighting. But for me, it's just like,
I don't care.
it is kind
of
of weightless, and it is kind of like, that's probably my least favorite part of the movie.
Yeah, I mean, if Batman gets thrown through that kind of stuff, he should be really hurt because he's not.
It's not like he's not. The first time he gets tossed, he gets up and he's like, he seems.
Yeah, okay.
He plays up the getting hurt. But no, I was going to bring up about Dark Knight Rises. That super emotional thing, that thing that really connected with you. That's from the comic books. Like, that's straight out of the comic books.
I mean, I don't believe I said that. My God in heaven, that this.
No, I know,
didn't come from
but I'm just saying, like,
book.
a lot of that stuff is derived from there, and that's why I want to see more of that stuff, because I know, like, a lot of that stuff is impactful and can be presented in a really cool way, and whether or not it's out of the bounds of reality or not.
Right. I think those stories exist, but I don't think there are a lot of people like a Christopher Nolan who can tell it that way. Like it may be the words that are, and the scene is described in a sense like that, but you have to have a particular director and a particular camera operator, and you have to have a particular idea of what you're going into. And I just don't think that, the direction that they're going in now, it just doesn't lend itself in that. And look, that's fine, and I'm sure it'll make a lot of money, and a lot of people will love it. But I think it's more for me, maybe, and I rarely say this, but it's more of that it's a lost art. It's just, I don't need to be told a story by overwhelming me with awesome, CGI and awesome, ridiculous fight scenes.
Certainly.
Really make me feel like I'm really invested in this.
Yeah.
Make me
and
invested in it, and I'll love it.
I feel like there is there's certainly an insight that has gone on throughout all of the, at this point, we've had, probably 40 comic book movies in the last, 2 decades.
5 years. Yeah.
Since the resurgence, started with Blade and X-Men movies and kicking off with Iron Man and Dark Knight and all that jazz. Like, it really just sparked this crazy revolution. And now that we're, 30, 40 movies into these respective franchises, we're seeing the studios and the creative teams behind these movies start thinking in a really different direction with these films, and thinking more genre with them. Like, we have something like Logan coming up, where that's
Right.
that's a take on a Western,
and again,
and other
right,
genres.
and that to me looks again like, hey, we're getting sick and tired of the same old.
Yeah.
Let's complete departure.
Yeah. Here's a movie,
and right, an actual movie, not a Jules Schumacher, Michael Bay jizz fest, where it's fights and explosions.
But I feel like Marvel's doing it pretty right with the characters that they have. I think the characters in the stories certainly have been. I haven't seen one yet that I've been like, well, that was a bad movie. Like, they've all been very entertaining.
I wouldn't know because I haven't.
Yeah, we were talking about this before we started. Yeah, you're a little bit behind.
I have only seen half of the Marvel Universe movies.
I've been very fortunate as to work at a company that we've had movie shows going on and stuff like that, where we got to see like every single movie coming out as they were coming out. So I'm pretty lucky to see a lot of the movies, and I understand someone like yourself, Thomas, who isn't incredibly interested in the first place.
Someone like
yourself, Thomas. Not getting
Works
around
at
to
9
it.
to 5.
But that's going to have to
Monday
turn
through
around.
Friday.
You're going to have to start catching up at some point if we're going to keep on doing this show, because you need to be.
This is true. This is a
know.
movie show,
Exactly.
so I should probably watch some movies.
And I imagine more often than not, we might be tackling some superhero issues, and all that jazz topics over the time, because it's certainly a prevalent thing. Oh, and anyway, so you were just talking about the direction of these movies and
Yes.
like a fine hand needing to be in place. Ben Affleck was slated to write, direct, produce, star in The Batman, his solo Batman movie, the first solo Batman movie since the Dark Knight trilogy
Dark Knight Rises.
that Nolan did. And certainly he's been talking about the pressure over and over again. People have just been asking ad nauseum and what's the status. And every single time he seemed kind of wishy-washy about whether or not he was directing it. And then a few weeks ago, he said, well, if the script's right, I'll do it. And then a couple weeks later, he was like, well, no, I am still directing it. We're just trying to get the script right. And then last week he came out and said, I'm not directing the movie anymore. I'm just going to star produce. He's still co-writing with Jeff Johns. And apparently Chris Terrio, who co-wrote Batman v Superman and Argo. Oh, he wrote Argo. And then wrote Justice League.
Argo, fuck yourself.
Argo, fuck yourself. He wrote Justice League. And he did a pass on apparently Ben Affleck and Jeff Johns' script for the Batman. So Ben has stepped down. He doesn't feel like he can fulfill all the role. Like he doesn't think he can bring himself to everything when it comes to making the movie, which I understand. It's certainly tough when you're in a suit a lot of the time and you're directing and you're acting and it's tough to keep all those things in. And
line producing and in charge of lights and catering and gaffing. Yeah. I mean, it's just ridiculous.
And he's coming off of Live by Night, which has Warner Brothers has written off a loss on it. It's lost money. It only made like $16 million on a budget of like $60 million or something like that. And certainly the first sore spot in his directorial career, not the first in his acting career. By any sense of the imagination. Yeah, Daredevil. Everybody brought up Daredevil. Which I don't fully get.
Hell with Daredevil.
I like Daredevil.
Like
Daredevil's an all right movie. John Favreau was in that.
Yeah.
Batman and the director of Iron Man was in that movie. And then Jennifer Garner, who is, but yeah, so taking himself out of the running or out of the role. Who would have you given any thought about who you would want to see do a Batman movie? Because I've there's been so many people. Everybody's brought up every director under the sun, Tarantino, whatever, Fincher.
Oh my God!
It's like that.
Could you imagine?
List. See, Kevin Smith was talking. Kevin Smith has a podcast, Fat Man on Batman, that he does, and he was talking about. At first, they were kind of bringing up directors who might be potentially in there, and then they kind of just started talking about directors who made good movies in the last couple of years, and it was just like, oh, Denis Villeneuve should do it. The guy who did Arrival and The Prisoners and is doing Blade Runner 2044 and all that jazz. Certainly, there's plenty of great directors who could work on this, but I don't know if everybody's right for the role.
Well... First of all, Tarantino would be an absolutely horrible choice to do this. Yeah. That would be hilarious. I'd go to see it probably. So there's that.
I couldn't even see Tarantino doing a Batman movie.
Oh my God! Could you
imagine?
I
kind of don't like that he's on this Tarantino's on this kind of historical kick, which isn't terrible. Yeah. I've liked the movies he's been producing. I wasn't crazy about the last one.
The Hateful
Eight. Yeah, I think I need to watch it again. But. It didn't really hit me the first time around, and I love The Thing, which it's kind of supposedly partly inspired upon, which makes sense when you watch the movie. But not as good as I thought it was. And I would have loved to see him return to more of a modern setting.
He needs to get back to Kill Bill, because if he wants one last cash cow, that's where it's going to be.
Yeah, I mean, weren't those his most successful? Well, some of his most successful. I think I think Django did pretty well. He's had some good hits. There's some hitish movies.
Inglourious Bastards probably did really well too.
I think he did all right.
But but at any rate, I think that Tarantino would be probably not the best choice. Stuart Baird would be an excellent choice for any.
You do decompression sequence when he's flying the Batjet around.
Well, that's the first scene in the movie. Would be the decompression sequence. But so if anybody that's involved in the Batman production is listening to this, then Stuart Baird's your man.
And also, I'm available for any position that you may have in any Batman production in the future.
I think we're both, but I'm probably more geared towards Star Trek.
You're gonna give up Batman? You're gonna get an opportunity, Tom? The producer of Batman is listening right now.
If they want me to direct, they're going to get a completely different film.
Oh, I don't think they're.
I'll tell you that.
Like, you, sir, have very little experience in directing. I would like you to direct my movie.
You're hired. Yes. I don't necessarily think that I have a name in mind, but I will mention about the Ben Affleck, since he's doing the Batman. I think he realized quite quickly he got in over his head, and I think he's the kind of guy. It seems like he needs to. he needs to be involved, I think, to really get. I mean, he can do a movie and be an actor and that kind of thing, but he seems like a lot more invested when he's very involved in it. Argo being, one of the prime examples of that, which was a fantastic movie. By the way.
Yeah, all of his movies. I mean, I haven't seen Live by Night yet, but I recently watched Gone Baby Gone, and that movie is excellent. Like all of his movies are so good.
You know who I'd like to see helm a Batman movie, and this is going to sound ridiculous, but
that's what we're here for, Thomas. The ridiculous.
Right. I would like to see Clint Eastwood direct a Batman movie. I think that could be.
I could see him do it too.
A very classic kind of really good story, or a really.
And
good
he's
film.
in with Warner Brothers. He's he has. I'm pretty sure he has a contract with them because all of his movies has been with Warner Brothers. Either that or he's just a loyalist because he's been with Warner Brothers for probably a million years. That and Scott Eastwood. Scott Eastwood was in Suicide Squad in a very small role, but his son was in there.
I just don't know that you're going to be able. I don't think it necessarily matters who they bring in as director because of the direction that this sort of arc is heading in with the advent of the Justice Squad. Wow, I need another one. You are
58 years old. Batman and his Justice Squad friends.
With the League of Squads, the Justice League coming out and such, I think it's just I don't know that you're going to be able to really carve out the type of story that you'd want to tell. So you're looking at somebody that's going to come in that's going to be somewhat limited in the scope because they're kind of directionalizing. Although it is somewhat of an origin movie.
I think the Batman is not an origin movie.
In the sense that it gives him a base in this new incarnation.
I think by that point, I think between Justice League and Batman v Superman, we'll already flesh out all the basics for this Batman.
I mean, do people understand? Do people know yet that Batman lost his parents? I think that has to be told again.
Once more.
I don't think people know.
The Batman should start with another open credit. Now, everybody brought up that criticism. I, for one, really liked the Batman v Superman intro, and I thought they did some cool stuff with it, especially visually. Like, I think visually they probably had the best looking parents be murder scene.
Possibly the pearls.
The pearls shot was my favorite. That's when I was like, oh man, the pearls on the gun, that's pretty cool.
But yes. The problem is, I am so utterly confused now as to who actually did it. I couldn't tell you.
It was inconsequential. They was just showing the event. It was just a person.
50 different things.
It was just a guy. It was probably Joe Chill. It was probably Joe Chill again, but
right. But that should matter, because it's mattered in almost every other incarnation. Now it doesn't. So,
but Tom, he was talking about the beautiful eye that the bats showed him as he was raised out of the well in the dream.
Okay, but now I'm reconciling that with the very impactful, the very impactful Nolan movies that I love, which had a really good bats, kind of how he works with the bats. So it's like the Spider-Man thing where I have to remember or forget everything I already know to fully appreciate this. I think that gets understated a little bit. Is the confusion? If I'm a casual forget about the hardcore.
But no. What you just said, you have a casual understanding of the origin of Batman. So they briefly went over it again and then moved on. Right. Like this Batman it's like 30 years into him being Batman. So, well, not 30 years, but probably 20 something years. I'm not Batman at this point. Like all that's ancient history. They just showed it again.
I'm not necessarily.
They showed it again, and it did play into the story later because of the Martha stuff. That was the seed for Martha later on.
Correct. Yes. And I understand that. And I'm not trying to harp on that particular topic. But
sorry if I'm incredibly defensive of Batman v Superman. But I will not stand to hear it libeled.
I'm not libeling it by any stretch of the imagination. However, it's the Spider-Man effect where
certainly
if I go to the movie and I see an origin story and then 5 years later I go see, okay, well, this looks interesting. I have to plot through another one. It's very difficult to get any kind of consistency, and it's a shame that there was not some way that there could have been some consistency along the trail. That's all I'm saying. I'm not downplaying it. I'm not saying it was horrible or anything like that. It was very well done.
If Nolan hadn't quick wrapped up his Batman and made it so nobody could use Christian Bale as Batman again, then you could have had your perfect universe, and I'm sure Warner Brothers would have very well gone along with that. But
I don't think Christian Bale would have.
he was game. He had said before, like after the fact, like that he would come back. But because who doesn't? He didn't want to see anybody else play Batman. He wanted to keep playing Batman. But I think, and I've seen this argument more recently. I've seen this argument more recently with people who don't like Rises, which I love Rises, but I do agree it does wrap up very fast, and for some reason he just goes off with Selena Kyle and passes along to Robin.
But that's to me, that never was. That is not set in stone.
That's how the movie ends. He's Batman at the end.
Oh, I understand that. No, it's first of all you see is him going to the cave. You don't see him wearing a suit or becoming Batman or living in the house.
Gordon goes up to the top of GCPD, and there's a brand new bat signal up there after they broke it. Remember, in Dark Knight, they break it, and then there's a new bat signal, and he is going to the cave, rising up. It's called Dark Knight Rises. He's coming back.
I understand.
It's the legend of the Dark Knight, Thomas. He is now the Dark Knight. Anybody could be Batman.
I get it.
That's the whole point of the movie.
But I understand that. But that does not mean that there is zero opportunity to bring him back if they really wanted to.
True, but what's the point of doing it if you're not going to stick with it?
If you're not going to stick with
what's the point of creating that sub or storyline if you're not going to adhere to it? Like, what's the point of saying he's given up? He's at the end of his thing, and now he's passing the torch.
But why did they do it in the first place if they knew they were never going to come back?
Exactly. That's what I'm saying is like it's kind of sucks that movie ended the way it did when you could have expanded upon it or you could have added,
I don't disagree, but I don't think it's justification for going back and saying, why did you end it that way? I don't have a problem with the way they ended it. I think it's fine as a three film trilogy, and I'm not advocating that somebody should have continuated right from that point. I'm talking about the way the film was made, the style in which the film was made. Man of Steel had a lot of that same quality, where it was in the Superman universe, but it had a real Christopher Nolan feel to it. There's no
Man
doubt.
of Steel, I get that, but it's certainly a little bit more fantastical. But you,
so you're
saying you like this adaptation of Batman, which was kind of not radically different, but certainly a very different take on Batman. And a very certain take on Batman. And now, and I think Zack Snyder's take on Batman is also very different from even comic book Batman at points. Like a lot of people were very up in arms about him killing people, the way he did at least, especially with the characterization of Batman the last 20 years or so, where he doesn't kill people and that's his whole shtick.
He has a moral compass.
Yes, certainly. And that is my favorite iteration of Batman, is the one that does not kill and he has his set reasons. But I went along with it for Zack Snyder's Batman. But like I just want, I love the Dark Knight trilogy, and it's certainly I don't know. I do really like Ben Affleck's Batman, and I think he can really do really great things with it, and I think he might become hopefully my favorite Batman.
I think Ben Affleck has a limitless sky to reach in terms of playing Batman. Yeah. However, I will say this. I think it's the less... He doesn't have to be, like I said, he doesn't have to be in charge of the gaffing and the lighting and the catering. But I think the less involved he is, I think the less good he's going to be, unfortunately. I think if he was directing this and playing Batman...
they upped his role with Justice League after Batman v Superman because they brought him on as an executive producer on Justice League. Because what they ended up kind of doing was they brought him on as executive producer as a sign that he is kind of the shepherd of this character, somewhat. Giving him more control over stuff. Because Batman v Superman, he was along for the ride, and I'm sure he came out kind of disappointed. I mean, he certainly came out unscathed. Everybody thought he was a great Batman. He was the least criticized thing of that movie.
Right, and no one thought he was when he was first announced.
Yeah, exactly. Except for you and me. You and me were pretty... You texted me, and I said
it. I thought, hey, this is an older Batman. He's perfect. I think he's not going to come weighing 300 pounds. He's going to get into shape.
Oh, whatever. Yeah, he looked ripped as fuck in Batman v Superman.
Yeah, and I don't think he's ever been that ripped for roles that I remember.
Man,
but
yeah, I get turned on watching that workout scene.
Well, I wouldn't go that far.
Thomas. Good God. But... Yeah, so I think they're very different interpretations, and that's what I look for. I always look for something different, but certainly familiar. I look for the familiar elements and try to, I'm open to whatever adaptation comes along.
Well, that's just an absolutely perfect segue, because to wrap this thing up, I want to bring up something. There has been This was, I couldn't tell you the year. This was a few years ago. I went to the theater, 2014, I believe. I went to the theater and I saw this little movie. And I went first with, I believe, my niece, who was maybe 3 months old at the time. Something along those lines, very, very young. And I was ridiculously taken aback with how good and how, I hate to use the term wholesome, because it was, not, I just don't like that word. I think it's whatever. But at any rate, so the movie I'm talking about, as you surely know by now, was the Lego movie.
I was there as well, by the way.
You were there.
Because it was our niece's first movie ever.
Right. And we all went. And it was just such a refreshing movie. Obviously, there's a tie-in here because there was a character in that film that was of particular hilarity, and that was the Batman. This is, to me, like, you can go in all kinds of different directions with movies, but there's a couple of movies that are of this type that get it right, and I think people should celebrate it. I really do. Like, the Lego movies, Up was one for me that I think was just a lot like that, where it had some heavy moments, but it was just an awesome movie.
It has a spirit about it.
You can't tangibly quantify it.
It just makes you feel
warm. You
warm.
know what it is, but you can't. Right. And it's so good. Up was one. Toy Story was one. There was another one I actually forgot now. But the Lego movie was definitely.
See, one. I feel
Wall-E was the other one.
Okay,
Wall-E.
so the thing you just mentioned, all three of those movies both have kind of these first 5-10 minutes of the movie where
heart-wrenching.
All three of those movies, I went in not having much expectation. With all three of those movies you mentioned, Up, Lego Movie, they were all Wall-E. They were all movies that I didn't really know what they were going in, and came at just those first 5-10 minutes. All three of those movies have just this sense of happiness and joy and laughter and obviously Up. No, but Up even has that. No, the spirit of adventure stuff, like all that stuff, like Off to Adventure, like that stuff in the first 5 minutes of the movie. The next 5 minutes is very sad and all that stuff.
Yeah, Up brings that down.
Yes, Up starts, but before it gets sad, it is also very happy, and It's rare when I go into a movie where I instantly click into this feeling that the movie wants you to feel. And Lego Movie certainly did that. I was laughing. I was in tears the first 5 minutes of that movie because I was like, "What the hell is going on?" They're just throwing everything at you right off the bat.
You don't expect the humor. You don't expect just how it's a tale as you'll see in Beauty and the Beast 10,000 the new version. But it's a tale as old as time. It is the same old story you've seen over and over again.
The Chosen One.
But forget that. Forget the story. Watch the presentation. It's told with just a complete humility about it.
Does not take itself seriously at all.
No, it takes it. It knows what it is. It's a humorous movie that people are going to see to have fun and to enjoy themselves.
I saw a quote.
And it's genuine.
I saw a quote for the Batman Lego Movie that said it's the most fun Batman movie ever. Which I could totally see because it's it's a send off and a love letter to Batman. Like it's pointing out the ridiculous stuff and highlighting all the cool stuff and just having fun with itself.
Now they'll have a time trying to top "Everything Is Awesome," which is by far the best song ever made in the history of humanity.
I've heard the songs from this Batman movie because they've put them out there. Fall Out Boy did one, and they are pretty funny. They're pretty good.
You're never gonna top.
They incorporate the nana 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 in there at one point.
Oh, nice.
And it is cool just to see that they're going to be making fun or at least poking fun at the expense of every Batman movie up to this point. Probably a lot of the.
Oh, I'm sure there's going to be all kinds. of
I've heard there cameos galore, and Will Arnett has nailed. When the Lego Movie came out, and I saw in the trailer that they were bringing in Batman and making him as big of a character as they were in that movie. I wasn't sure about it, but it seemed really fun. Like I was just like, okay, if this is the attitude the movie's going to have with it, then I'm sure it's going to be great. And I was really hyped going into it, I was hyped, but didn't have much expectation because I was like, oh, this is the Lego Movie. And came out, Batman was my favorite character. And I couldn't believe the things they were doing. They made him such an idiot, but smart, and just I love. See, again, this is a completely different adaptation. It's a completely different direction. Never would have thought they would have gone in this direction. I never would have thought I'd be this excited to see a Lego Batman movie. Like, what the hell?
I very much remember shitting on the idea of this movie when I heard about it. I was like, okay, wait, they're making a movie about Legos. So I heard that they were making a movie. This was around that time. They're making Battleship. They're making, like, what's the next? Monopoly, like not Humpty Dumpty, like, you know, Hungry Hungry Hippos, or like Guess Who? Are they like? When does it end?
When Ridley's
unoriginal crap.
When Ridley Scott was seriously talking about producing a Will Ferrell starring Monopoly movie, I was just like, what the hell?
Oh my God.
I remember the treatment sounded it was kind of Lego movie-ish a little bit.
No.
Somewhat.
For the Monopoly movie, I want a straight-up 1920s era real estate movie about people buying up property. That's
do you
all
know
I
what
want.
the premise was? Was that he was like, the idea was Ridley Scott was talking about the idea of when you're playing with your family members, it always, like, it's about the power hungriness of Monopoly. You know, when people get money, they become assholes. And that was kind of going to be the route they go. But it was going to be Will Ferrell, you know, played a Monopoly game with his family, falls asleep on the couch, wakes up, he's in a different reality. But he has Monopoly money in his pocket. And he's going around, he's on the boardwalk, and he's getting a hot dog, and he accidentally hands the guy Monopoly money. And the guy's like, oh, yeah, here's your change, and gives him Monopoly money back. And he's in this weird Monopoly universe now. And like that.
That actually doesn't sound
like that
horrible,
sounded like an all right movie. I don't know where it goes from there.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I'm sure it would be, you know, the Uncle Pennybags would have been the Lord business of that movie, and all that stuff. I'm sure it would have been something like that.
Well, speaking of, I was about to say, I cannot stand Will Ferrell. I am not a Will Ferrell fan at all. However, I think
blaspheme
in a sense. He makes the Lego movie in a lot of ways, so I will give him that.
Not a
blaspheme.
Not a.
No, not really. I don't think he's funny. I think he really, really peaked at Anchorman, and it was downhill from there. That's what I think. He's great on Celebrity Jeopardy. He was great in Anchorman. And I think ever since then, it's been a chase to try to get back to that level. And I don't feel he's gotten there. But
I certainly haven't watched a lot of his films. Like I certainly don't watch.
I could care less about it. Yeah, I don't really watch.
I like him as a performer, though, for sure. I think, you know, like you said, you know, Saturday Night Live and Anchorman and all that stuff. I'm sure he's not done surprising us yet.
Oh, I'm sure he'll grow into becoming a very dramatic character actor.
A la Jim Carrey.
You know, just regale us. Oh, God, don't. Jim Carrey is Jim Carrey no matter what movie he's in.
Exactly. We were talking about that earlier. Well, anyway, I think we're about rounded out, I'd say.
I think this is about an hour, maybe a little more.
It certainly is over an hour. But we didn't really get to hit on Adam West Batman a whole lot. You know, fun, campy. It's Adam West Batman. I was really excited, and I still haven't watched it yet, but they had a animated release come out recently with Adam West and Burt Ward returning as Batman and Robin, called The Caped Crusaders, which was like an animated version of the original series. And they instantly greenlit a sequel as soon as the second one, soon as it came out on Blu-ray, because I guess it did well, or was tracking to do well, one of the two. Either way, I still haven't seen it, but I really wanted to, and I'm glad that they did something like that, because Adam West is an excellent voice actor. He's been voice acting for years and years and years. He's certainly done far less live action stuff, so I'm glad to see him and Burt Ward come back and reprise their roles as you know, those campy heroes that we came to love, and certainly I think was had a great hand to deal with Batman's popularity sticking around over the years. I mean, obviously Batman and Superman are, you know, they're foundations and titans of the comic book industry, but I'm sure it didn't hurt having that, and he certainly made Batman something that we've never quite seen before or since. But anyway, thank you guys for listening to our first return Gidlow Movie Show podcast. It certainly was a blast. Thank you, Thomas, for coming back and doing this. And
well, thank you for doing this, because I don't think we would be doing this if it weren't for you. So thank you very much. I am absolutely awesome in doing this. So this is
You
great.
are awesome in doing this, Thomas.
I am. I don't know what that
No,
means.
you're happy to be back. I'm happy to be back, and happy to come back
Yes.
next week. And so if there's any sort of topics you want to maybe hear us talk about, we'll certainly consider them. Leave them in the comments below, and we'll see you guys next week.